Welcome to another episode of Cult Pop. I'm Jim Hall, and we've got a really cool show today. We've got first-time author Ben Tanzer and his novel Lucky Man. Really fantastic novel. You'll really like the interview, but I liken it to some of Stephen King's best work. It's just a fantastic book. After that, we have Stefan Bucher, 100 Days of Monsters, a completely different thing where a graphic artist has drawn a monster every day for 100 days. On his website, people then write in and talk about it. Incredibly cool stuff. I think you're going to love it. Before we let you go and we jump on to Ben, let me tell you, visit the website, www.cult-pop.com, and we've got an RSS link there. Click on that and fill out the information, and then whenever we do a new show, you'll be informed about it. Please stay tuned for Cult Pop. Welcome back to Cult Pop. I'm Jim Hall, and with me now is Ben Tanzer, author of Lucky Man, a fantastic novel. Ben, thanks so much for being with us today, and I want to congratulate you on a fantastic debut novel.
Well, thanks so much. I really, really appreciate your interest in the book and this chance to talk to you about it.
Ben, I've got to tell you, we've had a chance to talk here extensively before you came on, and I told you just how impressed I am with the novel. It reminds me, it's a coming-of-age story, 4 young men coming out of high school, each dealing with their own personal demons, personal issues, and following them along into college and their lives. And it really spoke to me much like many years ago Stephen King's Stand By Me did. But with this book, it spoke more to my generation and when I was growing up, and I think you just did an amazing job. Tell us a little bit about Lucky Man and kind of your inspiration for the book.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Hey, I want to say, by the way, I really appreciate the Stand By Me reference. It was not one of the books I was thinking of when I wrote this, but, you know, when I was the age of the characters in the novel, that was one of those novellas books I absolutely loved. I mean, I must have read it 15, 20 times. So, you know, Jim, you're the first person who mentioned it, but I'm a little humbled by that. You know, my book is focusing on 4 friends, slightly older than those characters, sort of loosely between their ages of 18 and 22, 23. It follows them in the waning days of high school till the first couple of years out of college. And, you know, my idea was to try to create a story where you had 4 friends or characters who are so close, they're almost of one brain. And the challenge becomes, you know, how do these characters sort of individuate, or how do they create their own individual personalities? You know, simultaneously, I was really interested in trying to tell a story about really one of my themes I come back to quite a bit, which is how do people cope, you know? How do they cope when they're from fractured families, or when they're dealing with issues of sexual orientation, when they're exposed to violence? I mean, how do people cope with things? That's something that's a real fascination of mine. So I thought, okay, how would 4 people do that? So one of the things I tried to do was create a book where you could actually have 4 first-person accounts, 4 protagonists, I guess. And so what I did was each chapter rotates from one character to the next, and they either pick up the story where the last one left off, or they tell their own version. And then I further tried to break the book into 4 sections over the years, and each section sort of highlights the struggle of one of the characters. And that was my intent. You can tell me whether that worked or not, but that's what I tried to do.
I thought it worked real well, Ben. In fact, the 4 different sections, breaking it in like that, and the timelines and moving ahead and stuff, I definitely really enjoyed the book. And like I say, maybe growing up around the same time as you did and these young men, I could really identify with it. And it wasn't just cutesy stuff. There's a lot of serious issues dealt with, sexual orientation, drug abuse, things like that were handled really well. But also it all rang true. That's one thing I really liked about it. But I loved your pop culture references and just things, everything from the Twilight Zone to just the kids having, when the guys would have their conversations, it reminded me of conversations I would have when I was that age, coming out of high school, and just kind of stuff that would seem so important to us in life at that time, and the issues and problems we would deal with that maybe now, as men in our 30s and 40s, you start to think, well, God, why was I ever so worried about that? But at 18, 19, 20, these are some of the most important issues of a young person's life. I think you did a brilliant job of bringing that stuff to light.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. You know, it's funny because I've read before, and I'm not a real good expert on generations. You know, you and I, Jim, I think fit in sort of the tail end or the middle of Generation X. that shorthand, pop culture is a real shorthand for our age group. And so, in my head, I don't necessarily write for any particular group. I sort of write the stories that make sense to me, but it is funny to hear people respond to the pop culture stuff because that's so second nature for me. Good or bad, I don't know. But certainly I spend a lot of time thinking about it. And, I think in this book particularly, and probably like your experiences talking to friends, it's not just a shorthand, but there's a certain metaphor. Like, if I talk about the Twilight Zone, that invokes something for people. They know that means there's a situation. It's a little hard to figure out. The outcome's going to be murky. Maybe Telly Savalas is going to pop up. If I invoke Greatest American Hero, which is a show from our youth, my children will probably never see it. People sort of say, oh, Greatest American Hero, that was that guy. So, I hope it serves that purpose, kind of like music does in a movie. You hear a certain song, it invokes a certain feeling. But again, it's not always a conscious decision. I mean, sometimes I think, how would this character do this? Well, this character would reference The Grateful Dead, or this character would reference The Breakfast Club, or hopefully even a better movie.
Well, Ben, one thing I wanted to hit on is the amazing, the book was fantastic, but your gonzo style of advertising the book was really fantastic. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you're really generous, and I guess this is an extension of that too. Very early on, my publisher, and I'd love to give him a quick shout out, Steve Laffler is a graphic novelist, and Manx Media is his imprint, and he was really interested in doing a novel, and mine was available, and I've known him for a long time, and he has treated the book so wonderfully. And early on, it was clear we were not going to have a big marketing budget. Obviously. But early on, I was also sort of fascinated with how, independent musicians, I guess particularly, market themselves in a world where there's a lot of clutter. And that's how I sort of think about it. There's a lot of clutter. I like my book, but there's a lot of great books out there. And so early on, I thought, man, how do people market things? What do other people do? And it sort of liberated me to try some things I would have been maybe embarrassed to do without a really good reason. So very early on, my publisher, Steve, was like, you have to have a blog, which of course there's 4,000 new blogs a day. But so I started with the blog as sort of a platform, but then I really used that to sort of experiment with other things. I thought, I can create YouTube videos. I can create a MySpace account, all these things I wouldn't have done. Goodreads is a great social networking site. Dunkin' Donuts held a contest and they asked people to sort of comment on what keeps America running, how do they keep America running, and clearly it's an effort to market Dunkin' Donuts, but I thought, there's a way to work Lucky Man into that kind of video. So I submitted that to the contest. This week Starbucks is seeking a new original idea so they can get more entrepreneurial again and more grassroots. And so they're asking for people's suggestions. And I don't necessarily go to Starbucks, but I said, hey, why don't you sell Lucky Man? So someone's going to read that. Maybe it'll resonate with someone. One thing I'd like to say, and I appreciate your thoughts on this, one of my goals, particularly with the blog, was to almost create this idea that, Lucky Man is a product people have to have. And that Lucky Man is just one of many products that are going to come out of this corporation. The corporation was originally called Lucky Man Inc., and then I reframed it, I rebranded it as TBWCYL Inc., because companies are always rebranding themselves, and I thought, let's pretend we're a huckster. Let's pretend this is the Simpsons episode where they sell the monorail, and let's say, this book is going to change your life, and the blog is this blog will change your life. So there's always this idea I would create a character that would say, Lucky Man is something you have to have. Lucky Man may truly make a difference. And everything fed off of that. All the videos sort of feed off of that concept. It's really been a lot of fun. And I don't think they sell books. And I realized very early on that didn't matter to me. I mean, I want to sell books, of course. But what I really want to do is, enjoy myself and entertain myself and sort of try to live like a working artist. And that's where these pieces have come from. I don't know that they do anything, but they create a sort of, maybe create a sense of buzz, but minimally allow me to meet other people like you, and certainly allow me to have a lot of fun in those hours when I really want to be thinking artistically.
Well, Ben, you've done a lot of fun stuff. I also think back, the blog, I've gone and visited. There's some really funny stuff there. I like a lot of your writing and different things. And some of your videos have been a lot of fun. I'm thinking back to the one that's like the old In Excess video, or was it the Beatles that did the card and throwing the cards around where you did that video just where you didn't say anything. It was just written cards about that. Anyway, I think you did a fantastic job with that, and I think it's really creative. And in this day and age, you've got to be more creative with trying to promote stuff. But in regards to promotion, your website's going to keep people up to date, and we've listed that throughout the show so people could see that. But now you're also working on a zine. This zine will change your life. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, sure. You know, part of it is one of my ongoing fantasies I talk about in the blog, which is sort of building my own media empire, right? So the videos are part of that empire, and I've done a series of podcasts where I've sort of got other writers to sit down with me in bars or coffee shops and talk about literature, and I put those podcasts up on the blog. But I've always had this fantasy for many years about, wouldn't it be cool to have my own zine? And then I really want to stress, you know, part of my fantasy with that, I mean, it looked like fun, is, you know, I'm an off-the-radar sort of obscure writer with some small following, maybe 6 or 7 people. You know, there's lots of people like me, and not just writers, musicians and artists and photographers. And so part of my fantasy with the zine was to say, how do I give some of these other people some exposure? I get to do something that I will find enjoyable, which is an ongoing sort of measure for me, but how can I maybe give some other people exposure? And I would add that with the blog, that's been a big goal too. While I rampantly and narcissistically sell myself, my goal is to always get other writers in there and other bloggers in there and people making music in their garage who are, you know, creating their own discs. And so that's an ongoing thing. How do you expose independent media? So with the zine, that's been one of my goals. And the way I've sort of stretched it out is I have a very good friend, Jason Behrens, who has a great blog, What to Wear During an Orange Alert. And his goal is to get musicians and writers exposed. He did an early interview with me. I really appreciate it. And so I started talking to him, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool to sort of link up with Jason and not just publish some story by some obscure or semi-obscure writer, but why not pick a song that invokes something with that story? And why not give some off-the-radar band a chance to appear in the zine? Because we're starting it off as
kind of a multimedia thing. You're
totally, yeah, absolutely. Then I was talking to another good friend of mine, Adam Lawrence, who is actually, I've known since nursery school, and he's actually one of the models for the character of Jake in my novel. And, you know, he is a copious sort of cataloger of street art in New York City. And street art's one of my longtime fascinations. So I was talking to him one night, and, you know, he's got thousands of pictures on Flickr of different photographs around New York City. And I thought, man, what if you took the story and you found a picture and you added some music and you got all these people no one really knows and you put it all together? That would be a really cool thing. So I get to work with 2 of my friends. I get to give people a chance if they're so interested. And I get to further enmesh myself in the world of sort of graffiti art and independent music. So for me, it's just a total victory.
Well, it's very cool indeed, Ben, and we're going to help promote. We'll have the link up at the website when people come to see the show if they want more information. And if you want to throw a quick info as to people trying to submit stuff, not just see, is there a special website or link people should go to for that?
Well, yeah, no, they can use the email for the zine, which is thiszine@yahoo.com. And certainly they'll see, you'll put the link. If they go to that link, there are submission guidelines. You know, I'm really interested in fiction and nonfiction. I love comics. Poems are cool. We're going to run some poems in the next issue by a great friend of mine, Corey Messler, who's a writer down in Memphis. And, you know, what I'm excited about is I like stories that are funny and I like stories that are dark. And if people can sort of strike that combination, they should really send things along. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. You know, the first story we ran, and the zine is new, we ran a story called Move In With Me by a guy named Sam Pink. And it's just a great little story, just a perfect little story. It seemed like a great way to kick off the zine. Now we're going to do some poems. We got some other stories. So yeah, I hope people will feel free to take some chances. You know, anything for around 1,200 words, 1,500 words, you know, send it along. If we can find a place, you know, I would add, Jim, that one of my goals is to sort of create a community. People who know they've got a place to submit work and they're sort of part of a family. I mean, when I have those opportunities myself, I'm really thrilled about it. So hopefully we can create a little This Zine Will Change Your Life group, and people say, that's cool. Those guys write, those guys, those women, you know, they write for that zine and they get taken care of. That'd be a lot of fun.
Well, I think it's a cool idea, and one of the things we really promote here at Cult Pop is trying to get people together who are trying to encourage. If it's comic book artists or illustrators or painters, writers, I just really encourage people trying to help other people out, people who have already made it, who have already gotten a book out and helping others, so I really respect what you've done there. But we've got to just about wrap up, Ben. I'm a huge fan of Lucky Man, and I want to give you 30 seconds. I want you to say in 30 seconds why people at home should buy the book Lucky Man. They can find it on Amazon. They can go to their bookstores. Why is it worth it to them to track it down? Give us about 30 seconds on why it's such a great book.
Besides the fact that you get to support independent media, besides the fact that we think it'll change your life at least for 5 minutes, and besides the fact that you'll help me feed my children, I think it's an interesting read. And the people who've contacted me have said, like you, Jim, this reminds me of a time in my life. Or I'm glad I found this book now, or I wish I found this book then. So apparently, at least for some folks, I've gotten into their heads, and that's a great outcome. I hope people can get into my head when they read a book, but if I feel like they're in their heads, then I think we've accomplished something. And, thus far, a lot of people have given me that reaction. I think that's pretty neat.
Well, I couldn't have said it any better, Ben. I will just say I absolutely loved his book. Folks at home, I really recommend you pick up Lucky Man. I really enjoyed the heck out of it. I had a smile on my face when I was done, and I really think you folks at home will have the same feelings. Fantastic novel. Folks, if you would, please stay tuned for more Cult Pop. Welcome back to Cult Pop. I'm Jim Hall, and with me now is author Stefan Bucher, author of 100 Days of Monsters, and what an incredibly cool book. Stefan had one of the most unique ideas of a website to draw a different monster every single day, and then people would write in talking about the monster and stuff, and he taped the whole process. It's just incredibly cool. The man's an incredible talent, both writing and artistically, and so Stefan, just really happy to have you on the show today. Let me tell you, you've done an amazing book, and let's jump right in and talk about 100 Days of Monsters.
Thank you so much, Jim. It's great to be here.
100 Days of Monsters, a very unique idea. Started with a website, you got it going into a book. Tell us a little bit about the whole idea and where it came from, who encouraged you to do this, where you have monsters, you're drawing some very complex monsters, some very simple, and then people write in and talk about them, and it's made a wonderful book.
Well, I'm really glad you like it. It started when I was in the process of having my heart broken, and I was driving on the freeway, and suddenly a monster just appeared on my arm. It's just, I should say right up front that I don't drink or do drugs, but images just appear to me, and this one was of a monster. So I thought, he looks friendly. I should draw him. And it was so much fun that I actually did 50 of them back to back really quickly. And that became a book called Upstairs Neighbors that I thought, publishers would just be standing in line to put out, which unfortunately didn't happen. But based on that, I started filming myself doing the monsters because I thought, that'll keep my interest up and it'll be entertaining for me to do. And I put it on my blog just sort of for fun. I didn't even advertise it. I didn't tell my friends about it. I just put it out there. But somehow it caught on a little bit, and people started watching it, and people started writing in about it. And what they wrote in about was, they would ask, well, what's this monster's name? And I'd say, you know what, that's really not my job. It's really your job to tell me what the monster's name is and what they listen to. And so I just asked them questions, and from that evolved that they would write stories to me about each monster. Specifically, there was a gentleman from Britain named Simon Darwell Taylor who wrote a story, I think, for Monster 10. That was sort of the birth of a nation with Citizen Kane of the monsters, where it showed everybody what could be done with the format.
Well, I think it's so impressive because you include with the book, once you got to publishing the book and everything, many of these stories are included with each monster, 1 or 2 or 3 different stories, and everybody has their own favorite monster, and some of the stories are just so off the wall and so much fun. They're just fantastic. But the monsters I just absolutely love, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, what are some of your... I have my own personal favorites now. I've gone through the book 4 or 5 times, shared it with other people. I have my personal favorites. As an artist and as the creator, do you have your own personal favorites?
I do, but I'll never tell. No, there are some... It's really interesting because there are some where I really like the drawing. And then there are some where I was like, well, maybe I would have changed this or that, but it really caught on with people and these really amazing stories came in. So there's really something about each one of the creatures that I really dig. So it'd be really hard for me to say, I love this one more than all the others.
would I be catching you off guard if I just asked a couple of comments of a couple of my favorites?
No.
Okay.
I would then pull out my copy of the book here and look as you told me.
Okay. A couple of my favorites are Monsters number 6, number 13, and number 68. If you wanted to tell us a quick little story about each, that would be great.
Oh, yes. Well, 613, and what was the other one?
68, also 58.
68. All right. I see. You like the big happy monsters, I see.
Yes.
Well, number 6 actually was fairly early on, so there isn't a story that people posted about him per se. But he was sort of unusual. He was very much in the beginning, and is in fact, I think, the only sort of openly humanoid monster. Either that, or he shaved all the fur off of his face, except for a big giant mustache and a sort of pompadour. He was a sinister-looking fella, but I think he's probably actually fairly kind, and maybe just got something in his eye. And as for number 13, I saw him as sort of a weird casino host. Almost. Come on in. But this was at the time when I asked people what kind of music the monsters are listening to. And so Sam Burks from Illinois, who wrote a story for each and every one of the monsters, actually said he listens to Joy to the World by Three Dog Night. And his wife, Brooke Nelson, wrote that the playlist is On My Way Home by the band Three, Where's Max by Three, Over and Over by 3 Days Grace, Darwin by Third Eye Blind, very appropriate, and The Sun is Shining by Third Day, because of course Monster 13 has 3 eyes. And lastly, 68 is actually one of my personal favorites, now that you say it. And for some reason, it's the really small things that everybody sort of seizes on. Because I was all happy with the way that the eyes are on stalks going off to the side. But what people then actually really latched onto, as it were, is that Monster 68 actually has nipples. And none of the previous ones had that. And so for some reason, people just went crazy about the fact that it's a monster with nipples. It's the little things in life.
Well, that's fantastic. Stefan, one of the coolest things I think about the book is how everybody can see something different and take what they will with it. When I look at number 6, I told you offline here that it made me think of, for some reason, and even after reading the synopsis there and everything, it made me think of Dracula for some reason.
Right.
The image to me was like he was with a cape or something like that, and that's the genius of your book and your work, that everybody's going to get their own little fun story. I enjoyed everybody's input and stories, but I've got all my own little stories in my head after I'd seen your monsters. So I congratulate you that your art is so thought-provoking and so much fun that it really gets, I'm sure, every single reader thinking of their own little stories, and their imaginations get running wild looking at your monsters.
Oh, thank you, Jim. Have you posted any of your stories yet?
No, not yet. I wanted to talk with you, and now I'm thinking about starting to go on your website and post. But that's a good segue. Let's tell folks at home, just tuning in, just learning about you, just learning about the book, 100 Days of Monsters. Tell the folks at home about your website and how they can contribute and still go online and interact with you.
Well, right this minute, we're still in the run of the second 100 Daily Monsters. So if you go to dailymonster.com, you'll see a new clip every day up until May 2nd. And you can then go to each monster, and there's a little button at the bottom that says Post Your Story Here. Click on that. And then you can see everybody else's story and write your own, which is really fun. And also, I mean, if you want to go back and you can and look at some of the monsters that have come before, you can certainly post stories for those as well. So it's not just limited to the monster of that day.
Excellent. Well, I certainly encourage the folks to go visit. And already you've got the book out, 100 Days of Monsters. Mm-hmm. That's been seen with a lot of success. I read about it. It was in Geek Monthly, and a lot of different publications, and a lot of websites in particular are giving you a lot of praise. Should we expect another book, or at least another book, maybe 2 or 3 more books?
Well, I'm crossing my fingers. I'm certainly crossing my fingers for a second volume, but we'll see. It really depends on how this one does. But I'm sure that that more monsters will be out there in some form or other. Because it's just too much fun.
Well, I've got to again praise you. I think it's such a unique and fun idea. It's very cool in the fact that as a guy like myself, the reason I love it, I don't have a lick of artistic ability. I've got a lot of friends.
I doubt that.
I've got a lot of friends who are artistic, and I'm always jealous about that. With your website, what a person can do is kind of join in the creation, enjoy some of the fun, watch you actually creating. Like with this book, a wonderful DVD comes with it where you can actually watch you create each and every monster and see the process in its entirety. And I think that's really cool. And then the interaction at the website, a whole lot of people are having a whole lot of fun with it.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, there's some crazy people out there. Are you kidding me? On the DVD, since you mentioned it, there are also open source ink blots on the DVD that you can download and print out. And then you can make your own monsters and email those to me, and then I'll post them up on the site.
Oh, very cool. Well, Stefan, that's just about all the time we have today. I just wanted to again tell you, I think it's an absolutely fantastic book. I want the folks at home to go out and buy 100 Days of Monsters. It's so much fun. It's an incredible book and a nice keepsake. It'd look good on a coffee table, look good. It's great for reading, great for fun, and great to tell stories. And while we have just a minute left, tell the folks at home one more time the website so people can visit the site and contribute.
The website is dailymonster.com. And I do hope that, thank you so much. I really hope you'll come check out the site, take a look at the book. And I think you're going to have a lot of fun.
And Stefan, we do have another moment. And before we leave, I did want to mention that I'm sure folks are going to love individual monsters as I do. I just mentioned a few numbers.
Yeah.
People at home are going to have their favorites. You're actually selling prints, limited edition prints. People can go to a website and then purchase their particular favorite monster. Why don't you give a quick shout out to that website also?
Yes, you can go to store344.com. There's also a button on the dailymonster.com website, and you can order any of the first 100 monsters as a limited edition signed print. And you can also order a Chef's Choice monster from me, and you can specify whether you want surf, turf, or air, and then I'll make your custom monster just for you.
Oh, very, very cool. Well, Stefan, thank you so much for being on the show. You did a great job with us. You've put out a wonderful book. I can't tell you how much I love it. I wish you continued success, and I thank you for being on the show.
Thank you very much, Jim. It was a pleasure.
Okay. Folks, go out, pick out the book, visit the guest website, as we've said, and as always, as I wrap up the show, if you didn't have time to jot down a website, go to our website, and you can see the show all over again and get to any author or any guest's website from our website. Just go to www.cult-pop.com, and don't forget that we also have the RSS feed, so you can be a little note can come to you in the internet and let you know whenever we've got a new show out there. So we recommend you click on that. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.